It's good to be with you this morning. It's good to create this community together through word and song. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I appreciate the confidence, the faith that our hymn projects. It's a nice reflection of classical Unitarian theology. It suggests that the universe is ultimately friendly, that God is good, and that humanity is destined for continual progress. The 19th century Unitarian minister James Freeman Clarke summarized such a position when he described his faith as, using the gendered language of his day, he described his faith as a belief in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. Such a faith is by no means unique to 19th century Unitarians. I detect a similar sentiment in the late 13th, early 14th century Christian theologian Julian of Norwich. She said, "All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." It's present too in Marge Piercy's poem, The Low Road. There she provides the basic formula for any kind of organizing. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 4, you can play bridge and start an organization. With 6, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. There's a great deal of hope in those words. Who, after all, does not want pie for dinner? I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I have to admit that I'm finding such faith difficult right now. The surge in COVID cases with the rise of the Delta variant, the recent UN report on the climate crisis, which the General Secretary Antonio Gutierrez named a code red for humanity, one political party deeply opposed to democratic practice and flagrantly dedicated to undermining public health, the other teetering on being incapable of desperately needed bold action. They form but a partial litany of the world's horrors. It's a bit challenging to squarely face such a list and believe that it starts when you care to act. What about you? Are you finding faith in your human fellows or in the divine easy or hard right now? We live in a period of great uncertainty. Do you feel it? It pervades much of my waking. The uncertainty of the hour is so great that, in truth, even the invocation of you, the rhetorical acknowledgement of the gathered community, is not uncomplicated. It is good to see you. It is good to be with you. I offer these sentiments entirely without irony, and it is a joy to be before you and, as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, offer you up something of my life passed through the fire of thought. And yet, I have to admit that when I wrote those words on Friday afternoon, it was challenging for me to imagine exactly who you are and where here is. Let me explain. As a preacher, while preparing my sermon, I have long relied upon a certain level of knowledge of the congregation. When I sit down to write, I think about who you are and what is going on in your lives. I imagine who is going to be in the pews when I enter into the pulpit. Sometimes I even stand here and gaze out at the ancient, empty sanctuary and imagine your faces. I conjure up the family whose children are in religious education with mine. I envision the widower who has recently lost his wife, the artist who's excited about an upcoming opening, the recent college graduate struggling to find their first full-time job, the school teacher nearing the end of their career and contemplating what comes next, the second-time visitor who shared with me last week about how excited they were to find Unitarian Universalism, the long-time members who are getting ready to leave the area and move cross-country to live with their grandchildren. On Friday afternoon, though, I had no real sense of who would be here with me in the sanctuary when I offered these words. Nor did I know who would be joining online or where they would be joining us from. It's really hard to anticipate week to week and imagine who our congregation is going to be any Sunday. In the last 5 weeks since returning to in-person services, the resurgence of COVID cases has prompted a dramatic shift in attendance patterns. On our first Sunday back, we had close to 200 people here between the two services. Last week, we probably had the same number of people join us for worship, but more than half did so online. So where is your here? Most of you who are online, I understand, are someplace here in Houston, but yesterday I spoke with 2 members of the congregation who are currently staying out of state. And there are individuals who comment or engage with our live stream on Facebook, which somehow we now have over 11,000 Facebook likes, from places as far away as Maryland or Vietnam. So in such a situation, I find myself a little uncertain whom I'm preparing a sermon for, what exactly is going on in your lives, and what, therefore, I am called to say. Should I be considering those of you who will be in the pews? Imagine those of you joining us online. Nothing in my ministerial training quite prepared me for this. Honestly, nothing in my life prior to March 2020 really prepared me for this. Like most of you, I grew up and spent most of my life operating under a series of assumptions about the predictability of the world. Time was assumed to have a particular rhythm. Day followed day, week followed week, month followed month, year followed year. All proceeded with something akin to the logic followed in the ancient biblical text. One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains forever the same. The sun rises and the sun sets and glides back to where it rises. Or, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. Religious communities like ours have long been organized around an understanding that time consists of nothing so much as repeating patterns. No matter the tradition, there is a sense that the wheel of the year and the wheel of life are supposed to follow a clear calendar and a clear cycle. Rosh Hashanah is followed by Yom Kippur, is followed by Sukkot, is followed by Hanukkah, is followed by Purim, is followed by Pesach, and everything repeats. Advent precedes Christmas. Christmas is followed by Epiphany. Then arrives ordinary time. It is interrupted by Lent, Easter, and Pentecost, only to be followed by another period of ordinary time that crumbles apart when Advent comes. Yule, Beltane, Samhain, and then Yule again. I could go on, but whatever the tradition, such calendars are meant to create an experience of a universe infused with cosmic meaning and divine order. As the theologian Aidan Kavanaugh once observed, they represent faith in motion on a certain and definitive level. The content of the faith varies greatly according to the community. The predictability that it offers, however, well, I think that's likely to be a human universal. First Houston is not distinct from other religious communities in this regard. We have our own liturgical calendar, one that is suggestive of the motion of our faith and which ties us to our religious roots and other Unitarian Universalist congregations. Next week, we're supposed to be holding our annual ingathering and water communion service. That ritual itself is probably familiar to those of you who've attended this or any other Unitarian Universalist congregation. Everyone is invited to bring some water that is special to them. They pour the waters into a common bowl. Water is blessed and then used for blessings throughout the years at important rites of passages, memorial services, child dedications. The ritual was created by two Unitarian Universalist women, Lucy Shuck Longview and Carolyn McDade. They chose water because it's a universal symbol, something that could represent the common mystery that is our lives. The mingling of the waters was meant to represent our connectedness and symbolize the ways in which our experiences, yours and mine, are shared when we gather in community. The service takes place when it does at the end of summer because historically, that's when many of us begin to come back together as the school year resumes and vacations end. I'll have rather more to share with you about the water communion and its roots in feminist theology next week. I mention it now because it is suggestive of the ways in which our sense of time and our liturgical calendar have been disrupted and continue to be disrupted by the pandemic. A few weeks ago, I had anticipated the in-gathering service and the water communion would be like what they were during the before times. And now? Well, now I have really no idea. What do you think it means for a religious community to regather when most of us will be gathering online rather than in person? What do you think it means to be a community that marks the start of the school year when many parents, quite justifiably, are anxious about bringing their kids, their unvaccinated children, any place they absolutely do not have to? Most autumns, we could safely anticipate dozens of school-age children with us on the first weekend of the school year. And now? In the past, I've thought of our liturgical calendar as providing something of a map to Scott's and my preaching throughout the year. We have in-gathering, then there's a Requiem for All Souls Day, Bread Communion for Thanksgiving, Advent, Winter Solstice, Christmas. Scott does a regular service right after New Year's that celebrates the lives of those who died in the previous year, a tradition that stretches back in this congregation at least 4 decades to the ministry of Bob Shibley. There's Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday, services focusing on Black History and Women's History Month, Earth Day, a spring music service, stewardship campaign, Mother's Day, Flower Communion, and then the cycle just repeats itself. It helps Scott and me in our preaching, and it certainly helps Mark in his preparing of the music to know what topics the sermons are supposed to be on in advance. Know that if I'm going to be preaching about a particular topic, I can go and research it, find the right sacred texts, and come up with, let's hope, a few clever stories that will guide our sermon well in advance. And now, if our liturgical calendar can be likened to a map for where we are headed each year as a religious communion, then I cannot help think of what the map as metaphor might offer us in these strange days. Those of you who are under a certain age might not really remember proper maps. Most days now when you go someplace, you plug in the address we're headed into Google Maps or an equivalent application, and we are given directions, usually with helpful audio guidance to send us on our way. Go 100 feet and turn right. Go another 100 feet and turn left. Google Maps seems to represent a world in which every place is known and every destination can be found. If you're lost, say, in Mexico City, stuck someplace in Coyoacan and trying to get to your friend's house in Xochimilco, you can discover the easiest way to get where you're headed, provided you have the address simply by entering it into your phone. It did not used to be that way. It used to be that you had to figure out where you're going by tracing out your path on a paper map. 20 years ago, if I wanted to travel from Coyoacan to Xochimilco, I mentioned Mexico City here because 20 years ago, that's exactly where I was, I needed to sit down and write out directions for myself. Walk this many blocks to the metro station. Take this train several stops. Get off, get onto this train. Go out the station, take a right, catch that bus, get off the bus, take a left here, take a right there, and then take this other left, and eventually arrive at my friend's house. Now, I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of time back then lost. Maps had edges. And it was sort of easy to wander off the edge of them when you were in a new place. In fact, I mentioned Xochimilco precisely because whatever maps of Mexico City I had back then never really seemed to contain full maps of that neighborhood. So whenever I was there, I was always wandering off the edge of the map and usually quite lost. My experience is not unique. In fact, in medieval Europe, map makers incorporated it into the maps they made. These are beautiful objects, if you've ever seen them, these medieval maps full of illustrations. If you've not seen one in the past, I suggest you look it up on the internet, or better, see if you can find one floating around the Museum of Fine Arts here in Houston or one of the area's fine libraries. At the edges of the maps, map makers would frequently place ornate drawings of dragons, sea monsters, and other fantastical creatures. In at least 2 cases, such illustrations were accompanied with the Latin words, hic sunt dracones, here be dragons. Here be dragons. The words are meant to suggest, wander off the edge of the map at your own peril. After the edge of the map, the unknown. After the edge of the map, dangerous and brutal beasties beyond human control or even comprehension. Here be dragons. If there's supposed to be a rhythm to life, a temporal map of season following season, a liturgical calendar that points the way towards what we should anticipate as the wheel of the year spins and the wheels of our lives turn, then we've wandered off the edge of it. Here be dragons. The pandemic and the climate crisis, and well, so much else. The thing I have come to realize, the thing that I am struggling to accept, perhaps the crisis of faith that I am having, is that there will be no return to the before times. Not really. Ingathering next Sunday will mean something different than it ever has before. The virus will continue to be with us. We will adapt, but things will have changed. The environmentalist Bill McKibben has suggested that this change should be understood as a map to the world to come. Reflecting on the pandemic about a year ago, he wrote, "Now we have some sense of what it's like, a full-scale global crisis, one that disrupts everything. All that has been held to be constant, shopping for food, holding a wedding, going to work, seeing your parents' shifts, and every assumption about safety and predictability is upended. In such a period, it can be difficult to find much truth in words like, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. Or even have faith that someone like Marge Piercy is offering good advice when she tells us, it goes on, one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they say no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. Time is out of joint. And the liturgical calendar, with its sense of what we are supposed to be doing when we gather each week, and its map for where we are headed as our planet circles the sun week to week, month to month, and year to year, has been disrupted, perhaps permanently. Stretch your hands to me. Don't let the world be blocked by my shoulder, disturb you any longer. If love is not forgotten, hardship leaves no memory. In such a time as this, I find myself struggling to muster that old Unitarian faith, the progress of mankind upward and onward forever. But I have found a sense of renewal in a different part of our faith. That feeling, that sense that we are better, stronger together than when we are apart. Cannot promise you a return to the world that we have known. We have traveled too far off the edge of the map. Cannot offer you a false sense of security or certainty. I know as little about what will be happening next week as you do. If my task is to bring you something like my life passed through the fire of thought, then I must be honest that my life, like yours, has been greatly upended by all that has passed. What I can offer you, though, and what this community can offer you, what Unitarian Universalism can offer you, is, whether you are here in our sanctuary or joining us online, is something different. It is the simple promise that we can travel together as a community through time. We can traverse the metaphorical and literal muck and mire that is to come, attempt to make our way collectively as we stumble, not knowing really what will arrive next through this unknown world with its upended calendars and time out of joint together. And being together, sharing something of all that is our lives with other members of this community, we can make each other's burdens a little less difficult. It's a simple promise, and one that is repeated in the words of our closing hymn. Let it be a dance, we do. May I have this dance with you? Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. The dance we do need not follow a particular set of patterns. It can respond to the unfolding rhythms, the changes in tempo, the shift from melancholy to exuberance, from downbeat to up-tempo and back again, that we encounter as we move along from unknown to unknown. And thus shared, it can empower us to make it through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. So that it might be a dance, I invite the congregation, both present in body here in the sanctuary and those of you online, to say Amen.